Ever find yourself, stuck in that scroll hole on your phone, where an hour just disappears? Or maybe you've gotten into a debate, maybe about a brand or something. You're like, my way's the right way. Even when logic's kind of nudging you, like, hello?
It happens to the best of us, right?
Totally. And that's exactly why we're diving into the fascinating world of rationality today.
Oh, Steven Pinker's book. I'm intrigued already.
The one and only. We're looking at excerpts from the Arabic translation, actually, especially chapters 1 and 2. Plus, we've got to dig into some of the juicy research Pinker pulls from.
Gotta love those footnotes. So what's got you hooked on this whole rationality thing? Why this deep dive?
Well, it's easy to think, rationality, that's just about being logical. But Pinker takes us way beyond that.
Oh, how so?
He argues it's about making our thoughts and actions line up with, our actual goals.
Which, honestly, who couldn't use a little help with that, right? Life gets messy.
For real. It's like that moment you realize you're never going to win an argument on Twitter, even if you come with all the facts in the world.
Ouch, yeah, that's the worst. I feel like I need to hand out copies of Rationality after those.
Right. But before we get too deep into Pinker's take, I'm curious. When you hear the word rationality, what pops into your head?
Probably the image of, the ultimate logician. Someone who weighs every single piece of evidence perfectly, never makes an emotional decision.
Oh, 100%. They probably haven't even looked at a social media feed in years.
Exactly. Living that perfectly rational life, untouched by all the chaos.
But what's so cool is that Pinker, he throws us a curveball with this example of the Kalahari Bushmen in southern Africa.
Wait, the hunter-gatherers?
Yep. And I'll admit, when I think hunter-gatherers, rationality isn't the first thing that comes to mind. But Pinker, he paints this whole other picture.
I mean, when you think about it, their survival depends on them understanding and predicting the world around them. No room for error there.
Right. He talks about how they use these complex mental models to track prey, considering everything, how fresh the tracks are, what time of day it is, even the types of birds they hear singing.
Wow, so it's not just instinct for them, it's like calculated reasoning.
Exactly. They know that just because a bird sings at the same time every year doesn't mean that bird caused there to be a drought or something.
That's understanding correlation versus causation, which, let's be real, trips a lot of people up, even today with all our fancy technology and stuff.
Seriously. So it's like Pinker's showing us that rationality isn't about living in a certain place or time. It's about using our brain's observation, logic, deduction to figure out the world around us, no matter where we find ourselves. It's like he's saying rationality is a skill you build, not some innate talent you're born with.
Right. It takes effort, practice, the whole 9 yards.
Totally. Which, I don't know about you, makes me feel both inspired and like I need to pay better attention. Because Pinker, he doesn't just tell us what rationality is. He opens the hood on our brains and shows us all the ways we trip ourselves up.
For sure. He talks about these rationality pitfalls, these traps our brains fall into, even when, theoretically, we should know better.
Okay, yeah, spill the tea. What are some of the big ones we should be watching out for?
Well, one that really highlights this is this experiment he talks about, the Linda problem.
Okay, that one rings a bell, but remind me, how does it go again?
All right, so picture this. You meet Linda. She's 31, outspoken, really passionate about social justice. She studied philosophy in college, was super active in those, anti-nuclear proliferation groups back in the day.
Okay, yeah, I got a pretty clear image of Linda forming here.
All right, holding that picture of Linda in your mind, I'm going to give you 2 statements. Which one do you think is more likely? 1, Linda is a bank teller. Or 2, Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement.
Okay. Given everything you said about Linda, I'd probably say the second one, the whole bank teller, A&D feminist thing, it just seems to fit.
And you're not alone. Most people go with option 2. And here's the mind-bending part. It's actually logically impossible for the second option to be more likely.
Wait, what? Seriously, how does that even work?
Because, think about it, statement 2 is just a subset of the first. To be a bank teller and a feminist, you first have to be a bank teller, right? It's like saying, it's more likely Linda is wearing a blue shirt and pants versus just wearing a blue shirt. Even if every bank teller in the world was also a feminist, the probability of being just a bank teller is always going to be the same or greater. It can never be less.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. My brain's doing a little backflip right now trying to wrap around that. Even when I know the basic rules of probability, my intuition can still lead me totally astray.
Exactly. And Pinker argues this because our brains, they crave coherence. We want to create a good story, even if it means bending the rules of logic a bit to get there.
Which makes total sense. Like, we latch onto the details that confirm our existing picture of the world.
Yes. And in the case of the Linda problem, we've got this vivid image of who Linda is, so we pick the option that best fits that image, even if it clashes with, basic probability.
Okay, so we've got to be careful about these mental shortcuts our brains love to take, because they can lead us right into those rationality pitfalls Pinker's talking about.
Precisely. And he highlights a few big ones we should all be aware of.
So knowing how easy it is to fall into these thinking traps, how do we actually, rewire our brains to be more rational? Pinker doesn't just leave us hanging with a bunch of warnings, does he?
No way. He gives us some really practical tools, almost like a mental workout routine.
Okay, I am here for the brain workout. What's first on the list?
One big one is this idea of Bayesian reasoning. Basically, it's about updating our beliefs as we come across new evidence.
So being open to changing our minds instead of clinging to old ideas, even if they're comfy.
You got it. Remember those Kalahari Bushmen we were talking about, the master trackers? Total Bayesian reasoning in action. They're not just sticking to their first guess about where the prey is. They're constantly taking in new info, how fresh the tracks are, which way the wind's blowing, even the sounds of the environment.
So it's less about having all the answers right away and more about always adjusting your mental map as you go. Makes sense.
Exactly. And then there's critical thinking, which Pinker argues is more important than ever these days with how much information's thrown at us constantly.
Especially online. It's like everyone's an expert, and it's way too easy to get stuck in these echo chambers where you only hear what you already agree with.
Exactly. In critical thinking, it's those mental tools that let us step back and evaluate information more objectively. Okay, who's saying this? Is there another side to this story? What am I not seeing here?
It's almost like a healthy skepticism. Not to be negative, but just to engage with information in a more, thoughtful way.
That's it. And then there's this other concept Pinker dives into that really got me thinking, the tragedy of the commons.
Okay, I feel like I've heard that before, but remind me, what's the gist?
So imagine a situation where everyone's acting in their own immediate self-interest, right? Seems rational enough at the individual level, but then all those individual actions, they end up depleting some shared resource that everyone needs.
Oh, right. It's like that saying, everyone thinks they can take just a little bit, it won't matter, but then, surprise. Suddenly there's nothing left for anyone.
Exactly. To think about things like overfishing or pollution, it highlights that tension between individual rationality and the need for collective action. It's that moment when what seems logical for one person can actually lead to a really bad outcome for everyone in the long run.
That's kind of a sobering thought, isn't it?
Sure.
It's not enough to just focus on our own little corner of the world. We've got to consider the bigger picture, too.
For sure. And Pinker really pushes us on this. If we're all at least a little bit wired for self-interest, how do we get to a place where we're cooperating to solve these massive global problems that require, a much longer-term view?
That's a big question. That's so important. So it sounds like what we're taking away from Pinker is that rationality isn't just about, winning arguments or being right all the time. It's about something much bigger.
Totally. It's about recognizing our biases, staying open to new information, and being willing to change our minds. It's about taking responsibility for our own thinking and how our choices impact the world around us.
And maybe, just maybe, if we can all get a little bit better at that, we can start creating a world that's a little more rational, a little more thoughtful, and, just a whole lot better because of it. So there you have it, our deep dive into rationality with Steven Pinker. Until next time, keep those brains engaged, folks.